Okay, let's get into it. If you had to pick one sound that just completely changed everything in the 1990s, for music, for culture, it has to be grunge.
Oh, without it. And it wasn't just a new genre. It was like a sonic protest.
Right. It went from these small, sticky basements in one city to this global thing, and it felt like it happened overnight. It totally flipped what was popular and even what a rock star was supposed to
It
be.
was an earthquake. And for this deep dive, we're going to hit the essential facts you need to know, where it started, what it sounded like, and maybe most importantly, why people still wear flannel shirts because of it.
And the starting point is so specific. We're talking about Seattle, Washington, right around the mid-1980s. But it wasn't just the place. It was a mix of two different sounds, wasn't it?
Exactly. You basically take the raw, super fast energy of punk rock.
All that aggression.
Yeah, that anti-establishment vibe, and you mash it up with a heavy, kind of sludgy sound of heavy metal, and from that, you get grunge.
So what was the motivation? Why did they want that sound?
It was a rejection. They looked at the pop music on the radio, all the hairspray bands on MTV, and it just felt fake, too polished, too perfect.
They were looking for something gritty, something that felt, I guess, more real for kids who felt left out of that whole flashy 80s thing.
That's the core of it right there, a search for authenticity.
Yeah.
And they built that feeling right into the music itself.
This is where it gets really interesting for me, the actual sound.
Okay.
Because if you hear a grunge song, you know it's a grunge song.
Instantly. It's defined by those loud, heavy electric guitars and these beats that are often kind of slow or mid-tempo. It wasn't about speed.
I mean, guitars have that signature fuzzy, almost broken sound.
Right, that's called distortion. It's an effect pedal that makes the guitar sound rough and gritty. And it was totally on purpose. They wanted it to sound imperfect.
So if the music was already so loud, how did they make it even more emotional? They couldn't just turn up the volume even more.
That's the secret weapon of grunge, dynamics.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Dynamics is just about how loud or quiet you're playing. And what grunge bands perfected was this trick of having really quiet, almost mumbled verses.
Building tension.
Exactly. Building all this tension, and then boom, a sudden massive explosion into a super loud, aggressive chorus. It's like whispering a secret and then shouting it.
That jarring contrast is so powerful, it just hits you.
It creates this huge emotional impact, and it's why those songs really stick with you.
And the lyrics matched that feeling perfectly. They weren't singing about parties or fast cars.
No, not at all. It was all internal. The lyrics are about feeling frustrated, isolated, confused with the modern world. And the singing was often raspy or even growling to get those feelings across. It wasn't about being pretty.
And they actively avoided things like complicated guitar solos.
Yeah, that was a deliberate choice. Showing off your technical skill wasn't the point. The point was the rhythm, the mood, the overall vibe.
Which is why the albums themselves often sound kind of raw.
For sure. They wanted to sound like the band was playing live, right there in the room with you. They kept it human, they kept it gritty.
And that whole raw, grounded idea didn't just stay in the music. It became this global fashion statement, even though it was completely by accident.
Oh yeah, the grunge look was never meant to be fashion. It was born from pure necessity.
Let me guess, Seattle is cold and rainy.
It's cold and rainy, and maybe more importantly, these musicians were broke. They needed clothes that were cheap, warm, and durable.
So you're broke and it's cold, you go to...
Thrift stores, secondhand shops, that's it. And that's how the uniform was born. Oversized flannel shirts because they're warm workwear, ripped jeans, heavy work boots.
I've even heard about them layering like thermal underwear under shorts.
Yeah, just to stay warm. It was all about function, not style.
Yeah.
And that messy, unstyled, long hair, not caring, it was a visual protest against the flashy, expensive designer clothes of the 1980s.
It's the visual version of guitar distortion. It was anti-fashion.
Which is why it became so powerful. Young people all over the world saw this and thought, why should I care about being perfect? The biggest bands in the world look like they just got out of bed.
And it resonated immediately. Teenagers started dressing that way to show they were part of this new culture that valued reality over appearance.
And of course, the irony is that it got so popular that high fashion brands started selling, $500 ripped flannel shirts.
The classic story. But let's get back to the source of all that success. We have to talk about the big four bands that really define the sound.
Right. These four are the pillars of the whole movement, and each one brought something a little different to the table.
So let's start with the one that was the catalyst, the band that took this sound from a local scene to the entire planet, Nirvana.
Nirvana is, you could argue they're the single most important band of the movement.
Uh-huh.
led by Kurt Cobain, with Krist Novoselic and Dave Grohl. Their second album just changed music history.
And that album had the song, right? Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was the anthem for a whole generation. You couldn't escape it.
You really couldn't. They took grunge from the underground and shot it straight into the mainstream. But the thing is, they weren't comfortable with that fame. Kurt Cobain especially really struggled with being a global superstar.
It's such a contradiction. They were protesting the very thing they became.
Exactly. But their influence is still so strong because they made being imperfect cool.
Okay, so next up, the band that brought a more classic rock sound into the mix, Pearl Jam.
Yeah, Pearl Jam had this slightly bigger, more arena rock feel. Their frontman, Eddie Vedder, was just famous for this powerful voice and his incredible energy on stage.
And their first album, 10, had amazing staying power. It was on the charts for a really long time.
A very long time. And they were also known for standing up for their beliefs. They famously fought against high ticket prices, and they often refused to make music videos.
Wait, no videos? In the age of MTV, that's a huge statement.
It was. They wanted people to focus only on the music. And they're one of the few from that time who are still touring and making music today, which says a lot.
Okay, moving on to the artistic heavyweights of the group, let's talk Soundgarden.
Soundgarden was one of the first to sign to a major label. They had a much heavier sound, really influenced by 70s rock.
And their singer, Chris Cornell, had a voice that was just on another level.
Unbelievable vocal range.
Eh.
He could hit these incredibly high notes with so much power. They proved that grunge could be technically complex, too.
So how did they do that without just doing a bunch of guitar solos?
They used something called unusual time signatures.
Hmm.
So if most pop songs have a simple, predictable beat, like 1, 2, 3, 4, Soundgarden would write rhythms that were way more complex and harder to predict. It made the music really interesting to listen to. Their album, Super Unknown, is just a masterpiece.
And finally, the band that brought a much darker, heavier vibe to everything, Alice in Chains.
Yeah, Alice in Chains carved out their own space. They had this darker, almost doom metal sound. A huge part of that was the unique vocal harmonies between their two singers, Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell.
It created this really haunting sound.
It really did. And their songs dealt with very serious, heavy themes, pain, personal struggles. And their sound was defined by these very slow, super heavy guitar riffs.
But they could also do the opposite, right? Their acoustic stuff was amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Their acoustic shows proved how powerful their songwriting was, even without all the loud guitars. It showed their incredible versatility.
So you have these four huge bands, all with their own style. But how did the music even get out of Seattle in the first place? It seems like it all came down to a small record label.
A very small, but very important one. A Seattle label called Sub Pop. They were the kingmaker.
Yeah.
They signed bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden years before the big corporate labels even knew it was happening.
And they didn't just sign them, they kind of created the whole aesthetic, the whole brand for the scene.
They really did. They used a consistent look for their album covers, lots of moody black and white photos. It created a brand you could instantly recognize as Seattle. Sub Pop proved a small indie label could compete with the giants.
And that whole authenticity over polish idea went right down to the instruments the bands were using.
For sure. They were using old, sometimes broken secondhand gear. Guitarists would play cheaper guitars like Fender Mustangs. Instruments that were seen as like student models was part of the statement.
You don't need expensive gear to make powerful music.
Exactly. And they were really specific about how they recorded, too. They preferred to use analog tape instead of new digital tools.
Why was that?
They felt it sounded warmer, more human. They avoided synthesizers or anything that sounded too electronic or manufactured. They kept the music grounded.
So when you put it all together, why does this movement that peaked 30 years ago still matter to someone listening today?
I mean, grunge was this massive cultural shift. It told a generation of young people that it was okay to be authentic, to be frustrated, to not want to be perfect or rich.
It completely changed the music industry, too. It made alternative rock the most popular genre in the world. Radio had to start playing real guitar bands again.
Yeah, the peak was intense, but it was pretty short, maybe 5 years. The death of Kurt Cobain in 1994 was a huge turning point, and the scene started to fade after that.
But the legacy is just undeniable. You listen to modern rock bands today, and you can still hear that quiet verse, loud chorus dynamic that they perfected. That raw, honest songwriting is still the goal for so many musicians.
Grunge proved that music doesn't have to be polished or perfect to be considered great art.
It's a symbol of rebellion and creativity that really did permanently change youth culture. Sometimes the dirtiest sound makes the biggest impact.
That's it, exactly.
All right, that's it for this one. Go listen to Super Unknown or 10. You'll hear everything we just talked about. Keep exploring the history of rock.